Welcome viewers to this special edition of the Geo Interview. And today we have with us a very special guest, Ms Mugdha Sinha, who is currently a Joint Secretary under the Ministry of Culture, Government of India. And we are going to talk to her about the crucial role which our ministry plays in preservation and promotion of the Indian culture. Ma'am, I thank you on behalf of my organization, and it is an honor to have you today with us. How are you?
Yeah, thank you very much, Digvijay, and thank you to the student-led body GeoStrata. I'm extremely grateful and very happy to be here amidst all of you.
Right, ma'am. Ma'am, now before we proceed, I would like for you to broadly expand on the perspective, like how the ministry itself looks at the Indian culture, just to set up a rough context for our viewers, right?
Yeah. No, I think that's a very good opening statement because the ministry looks at culture in a very holistic and comprehensive manner. Because culture is itself the kaleidoscope is the extremely vast, diverse, and so we look at in the sense of the unity that this diversity can allow us to bring. Also, we look across culture as how culture is being consumed by the citizens of the country, because even in the citizens of the country you have a huge range, right from the people who were born in, say, the early 20th century to people of this current generation, the generation Z. We all consume culture and understand culture, not just consume but understand culture also in a different manner. So the government exists for everybody. So how can government allow people to understand culture, how it can disseminate, keeping these various diversities, not just of linguistics but also of understanding, also of these generational, intergenerational diversity. Besides, I think the central government also has a very crucial role because culture is also an instrument of cultural diplomacy. So we just don't have the domestic constituency and the audiences and the spectators and the artists, but we also have a huge diaspora of our own community outside. We also have people who look at India as the epitome of culture and awakening. So I think we exist for all of this entire cosmos of people that we have: citizens, consumers, Indians, diaspora, and people of the globe, because Vasudeva Kutumbakam is how our culture has disseminated and moved across. So culture connects, and culture also has commerce as its other side. So we look at it in a very, very holistic manner because culture cannot just be about diversity and dissemination. It also has to have an economic face in terms of being able to create platforms and opportunities for the youth. So we have a huge task, and also because it's very amorphous. It's like an amoeba. Today, this is the fact that two of us are talking on the internet today, something that is a post COVID development. You will realize that we are right now in a cybernetic culture, man to machine and machine to machine with the IoT. So all this is also part of culture, and government also has to look at how technology, or for that matter any factor of production, how does that impact culture and what impact it has on culture. So I think that intermediacy and the mediation between people, culture, and instruments that impact it also become very, very important.
Surely, ma'am. I think that would give our viewers a better understanding of how the ministry functions and how it looks at the Indian culture. It's not just the saving the monuments or saving the languages. It's more than that. It's much more than that, right? So, ma'am, now let us delve into our sort of the crust of our conversation. Now, can you please tell us what all portfolios do you manage in the ministry?
Yeah. So if I simply tell you, I'm the Joint Secretary in the Ministry of Culture, looking after the GLAM division. So GLAM is not GLAM, it is an acronym actually. And this acronym flows from what is called ICOM, which is an international body called the International Council on Museums. It's an advisory body that sets the global agenda for how museums need to be managed, what museum management is all about, how do the museums interact with new emerging technologies, how the museums need to curate, do scientific storage, etc., how they should do research and education, etc. So the G for GLAM stands for galleries, and as part of my portfolio, I look after the three galleries: the National Gallery of Modern Art at New Delhi, Mumbai, and Bangalore. So that's the G of the galleries. Then L stands for libraries, and I look after seven libraries that are the national premier libraries of the country. And also, as part of the library division, I am in charge of the National Mission for Libraries. The A stands for archives, the National Archive of India, as you are aware, and all little, small, big archives across the states. I look after that. And the other A also stands for something which is very important, as important as ASI, but little lesser known than ASI, which is the Anthropological Survey of India. Has a huge legacy, has done tremendous amount of work, and is closely connected with museums, because the job of anthropology is to study institutions, and museums and libraries are all institutions by themselves. So that is the other A. And M stands for museums, of course, and M also stands, in my understanding, for manuscripts, because as part of the national mission on libraries, as part of the libraries and as part of the museums, I also look after the manuscripts.
Right, ma'am. I think that is as diverse as it can get. But I really think that all the portfolios that you manage have a sort of a public outreach as an important part of them, right? So, ma'am, I would ask you, what do you think of the next step in the development and expansion of museums in India? Because I ask you because of the simple fact that we are seeing a large number of manuscripts being digitized, or the
Yeah.
artifacts, the rare artifacts, are being sort of presented through their holographic
Hmm.
forms, right? And to reach a greater audience in different languages and in different regions of the country. So, what do you think is the next step in the interaction between the people and the museums that
Hmm.
they have?
Yeah, that's a very simple question. Looks like a simple question. Will have an exhaustive answer, because there's so much that is happening in the field of museums, not just in the country but also globally, and how we are looking at both what is happening in the globe, and also there is a huge dynamism in the country itself in terms of the huge amount of mushrooming of new museums that is happening, and the interest of people in setting up new museums. So I'll just go back a little before I answer your question. The first museum in the country was to set up in the 18th century by William Jones, who actually set up what is called the Asiatic Society of India. And out of the collection of the Asiatic Society of India, we had what is called, some 200 years back, we had what is called today the Indian Museum, sprang out of that collection. So from 1784 to say about 1936, when the first survey of the museum was held in colonial India, there were about 105 museums in the country, right? 105 museums. In the last 2 decades, more so in the last 10 years, if I can actually say that, as a result of the grants that the Ministry of Culture has given as part of the two schemes that we have, the Museum Grant Scheme, which funds all the non-science museums, and the SPOC scheme, which is basically a scheme for promotion of the culture of science in the country. We have set up more than 383 museums in the country. So 105 in almost 2 centuries, and about 383, which is more than double the number, and maybe more happening as we speak, just by the aid that has been given by the central government in the Ministry of Culture. And if you recall, in the last International Museum Expo, which is the first museum expo that was held to celebrate the International Day, which was inaugurated by the Honorable Prime Minister, you would recall that we had come up with an 800-page voluminous directory of museums in the country. So as I speak to you, we have about 1,201 museums in the country as of now, out of which about 383 have been sponsored by us in a big way, and many more. This year, we have sponsored, aided, facilitated about museums worth 311 crores, which is huge, just in 1 year, as part of the just one scheme, the museum grant scheme. I'm not even talking of this box. So this is the volume of what is happening in 1 year. And I'm very happy to say that after the International Museum Expo, and because of what the Honorable Prime Minister said from the stage, I think it really made an impact. And the amount of queries, the amount of proposals that we are getting, that we've gotten this year, are 7 times more than what we had got. Last year, we only did about 50 CR worth of museum funding. This year, we have done about 311 crore plus. In terms of the numbers, they have gone up by 7 times. So if we had 3 museums last year, we had about 21 that we have funded in one single year, which is huge, given the fact that the size of the scheme is limits our being able to fund. But apart from that, what is happening in the field of museum is we are not just looking at setting up of museum, because culture is not just about construction, because culture is more I would say deep. So what we are also looking at is that we have, see, the Honorable Prime Minister spoke about the Panch Pran, which is about how we can move out from the colonial mindset of looking at things, because India is not a box of curiosity. Museums in the country are not just a cabinet of curiosity or a box of curiosity. If you look at what we had since the ancient times across space and time and dimensions, you will feel that the entire country was so beautifully decorated. It was almost like every mile, every milestone was like a beautiful museum. You have so many monuments which are protected today, such beautiful sculptures that you have. So I think today we've boxed in ourselves in museums because of various reasons of practicality. But using that clarion call to look at museums in that sense, we've also looked at the legislation of the museums. So we have about 8 museums of national importance that are governed by the ministry, and we are looking at how we can look at the entire ecosystem of the museum, not just the artifact, not just the exhibition, but how we can do skilling of professionals in the museum, how the museum professionals can move seamlessly from one museum to the other so that they gain more experience and different kind of exposure. So we have collapsed all the various different kinds of act that govern different museum, and we have come up with one single act, one single legislation, which is in interministerial consultations right now as we speak, which is going to look at how the museums can build a cadre of professionals, because the kind of mushrooming of museums that is happening, we will definitely need a very, very solid cadre of professionals. So that is one thing that we've done. After the International Museum got over, we've institutionalized the Museum Expo. So the next edition, which is this year, the 18th and the 19th, we are celebrating in the Science City at Kolkata. And the focus, this year's ICOM theme is education and research. So we are looking at the science part of it. We are looking at how museums can educate, provide informal channel of education. And if you recall, last year we'd also come up with a graphic novel called A Day at a Museum. The idea was not just as a tinket, to provide a graphic novel, but the idea was to expose both the parents and the children to the concept of the museum, to the various professions that exist in the museum, and how children, the school going children, can actually look at becoming professionals in the museum by adopting the educational line, and where all can you go and pick up the threads for becoming a museum professional. All that was part of that book. So it was very consciously planned, not just as a source of entertainment, but more as a source of infotainment, where you will get information and entertainment at the same time. The other thing that we've done is we've come up with an internship policy. The guidelines are out. You can all read. They're on our website. The idea is to have a industry academia connect, because the museums need good professionals. The schools will come up, more and more schools will come up, which will teach museology, museum management, conservation, curation, content writing, digital management. Only when professionals from this field are able to find gainful employment in the various museums that we have in the country, To enable people, interns, the college going students, to seamlessly find their way into our museums, we've come up with this internship policy, which allows an intern without any experience post their MA to be able to join through campus selection. Also, by this, what we are trying to do is that, you hear in the newspapers that IITians, post campus selection, have got this job of this much package, and then you think that science is the only thing that actually enables you to get into the market, and get a gainful employment. So we are trying to break that, because museums will require professionals from different streams, primarily the humanities, and we want the humanities to be able to stand on their own feet, similar to the other streams that we have. So, on campus selection, you go on the campus, you get picked up in a museum, and then you stay there in a year. Then you can graduate from being an intern to a project assistant or a project associate, and that's how you grow. And then after 3 years, you have to move out into the market. So the government is preparing to provide the first experience certificate of working in the government to students who are majoring in any kind of museum related studies. So that is an assurance for parents also, to allow children to choose the stream that they want to, because usually when the children want to do something called म्यूजियम मैनेजमेंट, पेरेंट्स विल आस्क इसमें नौकरी मिलेगा या नहीं मिलेगा, है ना. सो नाउ वी आर assuring both the parents and the children. So culture will become important, because we live in a commercial kind of a world, and it's also important to have culture not just be a soft power, but stand shoulder to shoulder with other disciplines like economics, etc. So that is the idea that we've done. So substance, along with a focus on massive outreach that we've done last year to three of our programs: the International Museum Expo, the Indian Art, Architecture and Design Biennale, which is the second last day today. So in case you guys have not seen, you should also go and see. Last day tomorrow. We ran for about 115 days, with more than 6.5 lakh people till last month. We are looking for figures for this month. So that is what we are doing in the field of museums. We are also done a lot of international agreements. We've signed one agreement with the Metropolitan Museum. We are in conversation with the French people to be able to rope them in for a major museum project. We have got huge amount of feelers from museums in London and Britain, and also museums in Australia who are interested in long-term partnerships with us, because the G20 last year set the stone, if I would say, because India held the presidency. And it told us that culture plays a huge transformational role. UNESCO in 2015 actually brought culture as a very, very integral part of the Sustainable Development Goals. So we look at culture in that sense, and we will do everything that is possible to ensure that the language, the vocabulary, the parlance in how we look at museums. India has not been really a museum going country, but I think that is changing, because the contemporary generation is more interested in looking at museums, more interested in looking at the immersive experience that the museums can provide. So we are trying to do a good balance of a good conventionally curated exhibition, and also the more which will be more appealing to the contemporary generation, a more immersive, digital led, maybe in times to come, set up a multiverse of a museum, also maybe enable our museums to write smart contracts for NFT minus the crypto. So we are looking at all these, and we did everything as part of the International Museum Expo, where we've trained people through the various master classes, and we are also coming up with something very interesting called the Samvad Dialogues. So you will, as part of the Samvad Dialogues, the Ministry of Culture, the GLAM division, will be exposing you to various facets of how museum management is done, security in the museum, disaster management for the museum, how to do audio in the museum, what kind of logistical supply chain is required. That also has a contingent benefit on how we can drive the Atmanirbhar Bharat through the logistical supply chain of the museum. So there's a whole lot of work that can happen in the museum's vertical. I don't want to take much of your time, but you can see from what I've told you that there's a huge amount of interest and huge amount of work that needs to be done to propel this whole thing, both from the point of culture and commerce and from the point of connect with the people.
Surely, ma'am, I think that answer would give our viewers a good sort of context on what all the ministry is doing. We don't get to know what the ministry is doing, right? And with your reply, I can draw out three conclusions. First is that there won't be a digital divide in the country,
Oh.
right? There won't be, because I was seeing our Prime Minister's conversation with Bill Gates the other day, and he told that he was firm on this point of view that he won't let India have a digital divide, right? And we can see in the museums also that. Second thing is that we will see an incentivization for the students who are going to pursue museum management and other associated fields, because parents, as you said, that parents see that if there's a work, they will get a salary or not. Is it permanent or not? Is it internship or like sort of things that people will be able to pursue their passion. Like
Hmm.
people always sort of compromise sometimes with things. So I think that's there. And the third thing is that the ministry is making culture a sort of, it's
Priority.
streamlining.
Priority.
It's prioritizing the culture as part of our like sort of lives, right?
Hmm.
Ministry is taking it to the people as they are living, right?
Hmm.
We don't have to sort of think that it is it a part of culture, is it not? Like
Hmm.
we have it in our lives every day, but we just don't sort of realize
Yeah.
how a large impact it has in on our lives, right?
Yeah.
Like I think that reply would give our viewers a good understanding of what the ministry does, ma'am. Like seriously. Now, getting on with that, last year, as you said, that our Prime Minister inaugurated the International Museum Expo, and there he emphasized on certain things, right, which are as follows, if I like could
Hmm.
quote it. It's the need to preserve our history, right, and promote sustainability,
Hmm.
revive our cultural infrastructure, and developing cultural tourism, right? But the most important part, which I found very intriguing, was the emphasis he laid on combating smuggling and the appropriation of stolen artifacts, right?
Yes.
So if you can expand on what the ministry is doing regarding that and how important, or rather how difficult it is for the ministry to locate such artifacts and to like sort of bring back to our nation.
Hmm. No, thank you very much. Yes, last year, a very important emphasis has been given on repatriation of our artifacts that have, for some reason, there are two ways in which. So we were ruled for a very long time by the colonial people. So it was during that time when excavation started. There was no concept of what belongs. So anything that is under the earth belongs to the country, right? But there were no legislations at that point in time. The legislations only came about when India became an independent country. And if you read the history of archaeology, you will find that this is not just very specific to the country itself, but this has happened all over the world. In fact, I was reading this very interesting book called The Little History of Archaeology, which actually tells you how different kinds of people who were not even archaeologists, who were not even trained people came about digging. There were thieves who came, there were people from the circus who came, who went around, because there was this whole concept of this, this their buried treasure beneath the earth, and people would dig up coffins and take up whatever artifacts. So that is how actually various countries across the world realized the need for regulation. Uh, so much of our treasure at that point in time left, for some reasons, left the Indian shores. In more current time, we've also had a lot of what you say, objects have been stolen and smuggled across the out from outside of the country. And it makes sense that the treasure that belongs to the various sites, various museums, should be brought back if it has been identified. Countries all over the globe are looking at repatriation. There is another way of doing repatriation, which is what we are looking at, which is entering into long term agreements with countries to be able to have these artifacts back as part of the exhibition. Because how do you teach the children, the posterity, the history of the country if you don't have the artifacts? I would specially compliment the government of Maharashtra because they entered into an agreement with the Victoria and Albert Museum to get back the knuckles that Shivaji used for his own escape, which were lying in one of the British museums, the Victoria and the Albert Museum. So they will be in display. They will be coming sometime this year, and they will rotate, go about. The whole of the state. CMVS did something very interesting last a couple of months back. I think it was in December, where they inaugurated this exhibition of about 20 different objects which came from different museums. There were Assyrian objects. There were objects from Rome, objects from Greece, and they were pitted against our own collection. And then there was this whole understanding of what is called comparative understanding of curation in the museum. So I think repatriation is very important, and we have in the last, I think, about 10 years brought about more than 250 plus artifacts from across the country, and they have been brought back, and they are in the process of being sent to various places from where it's a very tedious, it's a very difficult thing. The ASI is very integrally involved in doing that. So that is how things happen. It was a huge, agenda point in the various G20 discussions, cultural group meetings that were held across the country.
Right, ma'am. I think we've seen this sort of a trend of like we had this during the British era that go back to the Vedas. Now we are seeing this trend of go back to the roots, right? We have to look back to move forward,
Mm,
right? We have to embrace our culture. We have to understand our culture first. Only then we can promote it worldwide, right? And the appropriation of artifacts is an integral part of it. We cannot just show manuscripts to people. We have to
mm,
show what we have made, right? We have what we have sculpted.
mm,
If I can give an example of the Hoyshaleshwar temples, right, in Karnataka, like they
mm,
are a engineering marvel, but we don't know about them
mm,
mostly.
mm,
But I think that we will surely look to more such appropriation attempts and seeing them materialize in the near future, right?
mm,
Now, ma'am, you said that you look after the National Mission on Libraries and the libraries in India, right? In this sort of this era where we have everything on our phones, right? Be it
mm,
the digital books
mm,
in the form of audio books, right?
mm,
In the form of a video explanation of a book,
mm,
in the form of podcasts. How are we going to bring people back to the libraries? Like the sort of this culture of community reading. We are
mm,
seeing it fading away, right? Other
mm,
than the students, we can't find people in the libraries
mm,
mostly. So how are we going to bring them back if we are going to bring them back?
mm. No, that is not a question. People are actually coming to the libraries, but the crowd that is coming to the libraries has transformed. I'll tell you why. Uh, Earlier, the libraries were there for people because not everybody had access through the internet or otherwise to be able to get all the information. Today, information is available at a click of a button, right? But even now, because of data cartelization, you will realize that you cannot read all the books. When you go to Amazon and when you want to check out a book, right, you can read a few pages, but you can read page one and then page three and then page seven and page 10. So knowledge is not open, right? Knowledge is not easily accessible. But if you go to a library, you can read the entire book without even having to spend any money. And there's still huge amounts of people in the country who still need the library. So libraries are not just for people reading. Libraries are also like the gardens, just like the gardens. The gardens are such a level playing field. You go to Lodi Garden, you go to the Nehru Garden, you go to any neighborhood garden for that matter, or park for that matter, you will find all kinds of people who come there. They come there because health doesn't strike adversely to just the poor or to the rich. It's about lifestyle. What the gardens do for your physical well being, the libraries can do for your emotional, spiritual, mental well being. So they should be places which are open to all, and very specially look at who enjoys the gardens or who needs the gardens the most. It's the geriatric people and it's the children, right? Uh, Libraries can offer these two communities the same kind of solace which they find in gardens. We are just not targeting these people enough, right? While I agree that we've been able to keep a children's corner, a ladies' corner, or a geriatric corner, but the infrastructure in the library has improved, I would say, is improving, but also the content that we are offering in terms of the books and the magazines, I think that also needs to improve. And this is what we are trying to do exactly as part of the National Mission on Libraries. I'll take a minute to explain what the National Mission on Library does. We look after about seven national libraries of importance as per the list that we have. But library, you will realize, is not a central subject. It is not a concurrent subject. It is a state subject, right? The states have to legislate on the libraries, whether they want free libraries, whether they want to have access in the libraries, how they want to improve. But because we understand that libraries play a very, very important role, we facilitate where the states are not able to do, hence the National Mission on Libraries. The National Mission on Libraries has two components. It funds one state library chosen by the state, and it also funds one district library, again chosen by the state. And then it also funds, both for physical infrastructure and for programming, which I'll explain later, are six national libraries. So total of 76 libraries. It's a 100 crore project, and till date we've completed this infrastructural or whatever technical software related whatever requirements that the libraries have in about 20 of the libraries. And the rest, we have only one library which has not really applied for funds, and we are really pursuing with them. But rest all of them have been sanctioned, and you will see in the coming times, in the next 6 months, the Rampur Raza Library getting a faceover, and the Delhi Public Library opposite the old Delhi railway station. You will see it's completely being revamped uh, to provide better infrastructure to the readers who come there, to provide more digital and tech outreach, all the podcast, all the audio, all the free downloads, all the Wi-Fi for the students. We are also trying to improve the reading rooms of the library to make better tables with the plug points, provide microwaves for students who come and study. If you look at libraries across, I've just returned from Srinagar from a capacity building course of the libraries organized by the National Mission on Libraries. I had a look at the SPS library, their manuscripts. What we need to do is, huge amount of children today taking part in competition are accessing our libraries to read in the comfort of the reading rooms. And this huge amount of people which is coming today needs to be facilitated. A person who comes at 8 a.m., leaves at 8 p.m., needs better seating, needs Wi-Fi, needs a hot case to be able to heat the food that he gets. So we are looking at all these kind of things, so we make the libraries more comfortable, because I believe that the libraries are the drawing rooms of the community, which I've been saying since the festival of the libraries, that people should just be able to walk in, you should have your conversations there, you should be able to meet your friends there. The geriatric population should come and access, the children should come. In fact, we are also trying to see if we can map the anganwadis and the pre schools to our libraries and create children's corner in the libraries, so all the basic pre first standard teaching can happen in the library using the resources of the library. I must also compliment the National Book Trust, which has looked at the regional linguistic diversity and to offer books for the children in different languages. This year's book fair had a huge offering in terms of various books that were translated in different languages for the children. I think these are things that we are doing. Tactile books we are looking at, audio we are looking at. For the people who use the braille book, I think instead of continuing to have the braille book, we can also provide an alternative in terms of the podcast for the people who are visually challenged, for that matter, because that will also give them another opportunity, another easier way, because the idea of technology is to ease the quality of life. So this is what we are looking at when we look at the entire dimension. There's another if you're not part of the national mission on libraries somehow and you still need funding, we have another scheme called the Raja Ram Mohan Roy Library Foundation, which offers two kinds of scheme: the matching scheme, which is all for your infrastructure, and this is right down to the village level, by the way, and we make no distinction between state government, district government, village level library. We even offer resources to NGOs in the library sector, at any level, at any level, which is through the Rajaram Mohan Roy Library Foundation. And I think we funded about 5,000 libraries this year across various states. We have another non-matching share where you don't have to contribute at all, which is for programming. And I think the libraries need to improve their programming. Just as you have the know your customer, people in the library should know their library, because unless you know the resources that you are sitting on, and if you can bring those resources and market those resources appropriately to the audience, you will not have audiences coming to you. All the literary festivals that we have in the country, I'm given to understand that there are about 270, including the children's literature festivals, which happen. Every city has a literary festival. I am absolutely open to open the portals of my library to all of these literary festivals which are taking place. Please come and do sessions in the library. In fact, in Mumbai, the Kala Ghoda Festival does the session at the CSL Library, which is in the Asiatic Society of Mumbai. We are looking at opening the doors of all our libraries, and I urge the state governments to do likewise, so that more and more festivals, instead of being held elsewhere, can happen in the libraries where the books are and where the readers can be brought. Two more interesting things that we've done as part of the Festival of Libraries. One is we are looking at the role of publishers very seriously, because all the manuscripts that we have in the library, see, digitization and preservation of the manuscript and conservation of the manuscript is more from a long term perspective of keeping them alive. But what are we doing to disseminate the information that is contained in those manuscripts so that people can read them in the languages that they want to read, and people can research about them? Because then how do you understand the mind of the people who created this vast Indian knowledge system over the years, and how we can benefit? Because if you look at what one of the French philosophers said, Andre Gide, he said that everything that needed to be said has already been said. Why it needs to be said again is because people were not listening, right? So we were not listening because we were not born in that time. So we need to bring out those manuscripts, get them transliterated or translated, have annotated catalogs made, and then distribute the material that is there so that people can read them. So we have another set of library emerging from our manuscripts. That is very, very important, because otherwise, how do you archive the contemporary times? How do you make the reader read what is written in the manuscript and give his own understanding of what the manuscript contains? So the research part is very important. Because we understood that the research part is very, very, very crucial, we started what is called the biblio on demand. So if you are a researcher and if you're researching on a topic, the National Library at Kolkata, it is the depository library of the country, which means that all the 170 lakh plus books which are published every year, a copy of that goes to the National Library. So as a researcher, if you're wanting to research anything, we are happy on a small payment, a token payment of a fee, because we also want library to be able to raise their bar to become service providers, to compete in this global world. So we will give you a list of biblio from out of the library, which contains all the books that that have been published ever since eternity and published even today as of now. And based on that, you can keep demanding in multiples of 10 or 20, and the fee will go up slightly. So that is a service that we started. The other thing that we are doing, apart from the National Mission on Libraries, which is very interconnected, is what is called the One Nation, One Digital Library, where all the digitization, connecting, because as a researcher, you will not be really interested in going to each and every URL of each and every library to access books. So if you can get that on one platform for you. So we are initially looking at the biblio of all the 80 central government departments that we have, and we will make that accessible to the people. Right now, we have about 700 rare books which are accessible outside the bounds of copyright to be downloaded free of cost at the India Culture portal. The National Archives of India has about 2.50 crore documents of archival value, which have been created in the last so many years, which can be downloaded by research scholars, by readers, by journalists, by anybody who's interested. So that is the kind of work that is going in the field of libraries and archives.
The thing you told about the manuscripts being sort of disseminated by deciphering of their scripts, right? I get reminded of Carl Sagan, the famous astronomer, who said that the books are sort of a source of communication with people who have lived thousands of years before, right? It's a sneak peek into the mind of a person who has lived thousands of years before. They have given you some knowledge. You cannot expect to sort of show a complicit nature and ignore it. You have to see what they have told. It's a knowledge worth billions, if I may say so, because the amount of time it has taken humanity to acquire this knowledge is too much. We cannot expect, or we cannot afford to lose it, right?
Yeah.
I think this dissemination and sort of an interpretation in our sort of contemporary times is a necessity for us to understand all the ancient knowledge, right? We cannot, of course,
Absolutely.
uh, apply all the rules of the ancient world currently, but we can sort of fine tune them according to our needs, right?
So I have been privy to such beautiful illuminated and illustrated handwritten manuscripts, sometimes on deer skin, sometimes, Ramayana in a different language altogether. Encyclopedias that we are so used to referring to, encyclopedias on the Ashva Shastra, on the Gaj Shastra, which are encyclopedias about zoology of how, different breeds of animals, what is done to what breed has what kind of diseases, what are the physiological characteristics of that breed. Such intricately written manuscripts, and such hundreds of years ago. If you just looked at Panchatantra, the Panchatantra stories were written in the 4th century by Vishnugupta. They traveled to the Middle East, and from the Middle East, they inspired during the so-called Age of Enlightenment. La Fontaine, he started writing his own stories based on the stories of Panchatantra. Look at the kind of influence that our culture has had on the West, but nobody is really speaking about it. So I think the libraries will always eternally remain important. Just the character of the people reading the library is changing. All we can do is see collaboration, breaking the silos, and bringing people together will actually energize the ecosystem of the libraries. And this is exactly what we try to do in the Festival of Libraries that was celebrated in August or last year, inaugurated by the president and the valedictory, of course, by the vice president. We need to all come together. Collaboration will be the defining way in how culture does business.
Surely, ma'am, adding to your point, where the West and the Middle East has benefited from the knowledge from the East, right? That is the India, China, Japan, or the other civilizations, right? I get reminded of our president, Madam President, when she gave the speech during the Festival of Libraries. She told that the books are sort of a bridge between civilizations, right? And the knowledge systems, they are not of a community, right? They are of whole of humanity. They are a
Yeah.
heritage of the humanity. We shouldn't let them sort of get divided into languages, regions, or other sort of aspects of division, right? So I think people should really come together and look after these things. People are actually researching on different scripts. Like we haven't still been able to decipher the Harappan script, right? And once we do that, I think that would open a plethora of knowledge that we are sort of uh, we are facing a lacuna in understanding that civilization, right?
Mm.
So, ma'am, you earlier in the conversation you mentioned of the Anthropological Survey of India, right? So I was looking up on this particular body, and I saw that it deals, or rather, it's a premier institute under the Ministry of Culture, which
Mm.
it deals into the biocultural exploration, right?
Mm.
So in biocultural exploration, all I could come up with currently is how does the Anthropological Survey of India sort
Mm.
of safeguard and preserve the sort of tribal heritage of the country? Because
Mm.
we know they most of the tribal populations in India do not have a sort of a repository, or they do not have a sort of a political system that stable that as ours. They don't have a system that saves everything that they write, that they understand, that they live. Other than it could be dance forms, right? In the dance forms, they save it. It could be monuments, it could be cave paintings, right? So, how does the Anthropological Survey of India play a role in bringing them closer to their own culture?
Yeah. Thank you very much for actually asking me a question. This is for the first time that in an interview from the Ministry of Culture, we are talking of the Anthropological Survey of India, and I'm going to take some time on this because this is a subject which is very dear to me for the simple reason that we've really not utilized the value that the anthropology as a discipline offers to the country. In fact, ethnography, as people understand it in the corporate world, is being widely used for policy making. And anthropology is not just equivalent to tribes and tribal, because anthropology does a whole lot more than just that. There's an ethno vision of understanding an organization. The General Motors, at some point in time, studied all their various offices located in different parts of the country to see why one office was doing the same task more efficiently than the other. And that was because of an ethnographic study. So it is not just anthropology does not just study the tribes, but in the 1950s, a huge amount of work called the Peoples of India was done. There are about 400 plus tribes, 256 denotified tribes, and the particularly vulnerable PVGTs, as we call them. So different in the tribal ecosystem. Also, there are people who are at different kinds of levels of development and exposure for various reasons. So all these peoples of India was actually a very, very comprehensive study that was done across the country for each and every state. Very recently, as part of the Niti Aayog project, we have done a study of about 250 out of the 256 denotified tribes. There is a Ministry of Tribal Affairs which is also setting up tribal museums to expose the country about about who the tribes are, the kind of contributions the tribes have made. There is a huge history of tribal uprisings against the colonial power, which have not really been studied at all. We know of Birsa Munda, but there are huge amount of people, tribes which have contributed. So about 15 tribal museums are coming up in the country, facilitated by the Ministry of Tribal Affairs. But you just mentioned about the fact, the discovery of the script. Let me also tell you something what anthropology is capable of doing and what we are doing actually in the ministry. We are studying what is called one. We have undertaken a project very recently, the Anthropological Survey of India, to study the cattle market in the country. You would never have thought that the anthropology does something like that. I, as the SDM of Ajmer, was involved with two Pushkar Melas. And the moment I came to know that anthropology can also look at that, courtesy Professor B.V. Sharma ji, who's the director of the Anthropological Survey of India, I was absolutely delighted that we are going to study the cattle markets, because they have their own, they are the precursors of the bazaars, and we've really not studied them from an anthropological lens. So that is happening. The other thing that we are doing with archaeology is looking at what you call, Professor Neeraj Rai is working on this with us, and um, uh, the institute at Lucknow and the institute at Hyderabad, CCMB. Professor Vasant Shinde is also working on this, which is looking at the genome sequencing, through the genome sequencing, looking at our archaeological skeletal remains and what they can tell us, which simple archaeological evidence may not have been able to tell us. We are also undertaking a study in collaboration with a university in UK to study through the isotopes technology what is called the dietary habits of the people who are not there anymore, which can tell us a whole lot about how civilizations came and how civilizations died, whether they were faced with drought, what was the dietary patterns of those. So anthropology is capable of doing so much more. Recently, if you'd read in last year's budget announcement, it was announced that sickle cell anemia and beta thalassemia, right? We have what is called the CRISPR technology, which just come into being. Of course, we don't subscribe to the CRISPR Caesar cutting of the genes as such, but a huge amount of study can be done, because the tribal people suffer from both sickle cell anemia and beta thalassemia, uh, vis-a-vis the other people in the population bracket. So we are doing these kind of regional studies of the particularly vulnerable tribals. Then we are expanding it from the local who have it. Then we are going into the regional and seeing whether the population there has it. We are studying their gastronomic, cuisines, and seeing what is different, what gives them immunity. It's so intricate. Last year only, we participated. The ministry, for the first time, participated in the World Anthropological Union, the Congress, which was held in the Delhi University. We sponsored two sessions, and we met a huge amount of people from across the various universities. So anthropology as a discipline has huge amount of value to add to the work, that not just that we are doing, but also what can happen, how the policies that are made by us and by the states are absorbed by different people. That is also something that anthropology can study, and we've not reached that far. So we are working on how we can use an anthro vision or an anthro lens to study the various institutions, including the museums, including the libraries, from this anthrovision lens. So you will see in times to come lot of important projects that we've taken, some of which I've mentioned, but the huge amount of work that is happening silently across our nine regional centers that we have. And a very nice tribal museum is also coming up, by the way, in Kolkata, in the new ANSI building, so which will give you a flavor of the kind of work that we are wanting to do in this field.
Really, ma'am, that was something which we had no idea that the anthropological survey did, right? And being from PCM background, I can only think of it as the Archaeological Survey of India as physics and Anthropological Survey of India as mathematics. Both are correlated and both are sort of supplementing each other, right? That is something to think on. Like people should pursue this field. It has so much diversity and so broad scope, right?
Yes.
Now you mentioned in the earlier as well about the Indian cultural diplomacy, right? So we have seen the Buddhist relics moving to Thailand, right, recently and coming back to India. We saw the large amounts of crowds gathering to just have a look at the relics, right? We have also seen all these temple restoration projects in the Southeast Asian nations, which have a civilizational connection with India, right? So how does the Ministry of Culture collaborate with the Foreign Ministry to sort of facilitate these projects?
Oh, so the huge amount of work. So one is the work that we are doing with the government of France for the upcoming National Museum. That will involve a huge amount of collaboration, interministerial. It's a huge vision of the Honorable Prime Minister, which was the video walk of which was inaugurated by the Honorable Prime Minister at the time of the International Museum Expo last year. I just mentioned that we've entered into an agreement with the Metropolitan Museum, which will be focused on long-term agreements in terms of what we spoke about, loans of various artifacts as part of rotating and traveling exhibitions, both incoming and outgoing. So they will get exhibitions, and we will also take exhibitions that we want to take outside. So that will happen, because that it's not an easy thing, because you have to do a lot of research. You have to build a story, because exhibitions are all about that. You have to have a narrative. You have to have a curation. You have to have content. So that is happening. Then we are also looking at conservation and scientific storage, how storage can be made accessible to the people instead, because storage allows rotation of in the museum, allows new kind of exhibitions to happen. But scientific storage also enables you to preserve the artifacts that you have for a longer time, and a much longer time, for almost till eternity. So we are working on those very very crucial things, which may not have a public face, but which will be important for our country, because these are all heritage that we have. Then we are very seriously looking at conservation, capacity building in conservation. We used to have something very important, and we are working and we are building. The Sambad series is just a very small tip of the iceberg of the kind of work that we want to do in building up a curriculum for museum management courses. Uh, the Indian Institute of Heritage, I would say, last year, in fact, in July, the UGC approved the Indian Institute of Heritage, with its already 40-year-old legacy as the National Museum Institute, and we have expanded that institute in the last 1 year from 3 faculties that it had to 2 more faculties that we've added at the postgraduate level, which is archaeology and epigraphy and cryptology. We are also looking at a 5-year plan for the Indian Institute of Heritage to make it the premier umbrella university in the country for all things heritage and culture. So that is a huge task, which involves again infrastructure development, professionals coming in, 3 different kinds of legislations. I mentioned one legislation already to you. These will enable us to have more overarching global outreach. The Binale, in fact, is also a cultural product akin to a global cultural initiative, as the Honorable Prime Minister spoke from the stage and said, which will enable us to do an outreach to connect with Dubai Art, with Berlin Design Week, with the Sao Paulo and the Venice Biennale. The London Biennale has invited us, the Jeddah Biennale has invited us. This has never happened before. We are the youngest Biennale in terms of any ministry in the country doing a Biennale like this. So these are all kind of outreaches. We have 2 important projects. The Mosam project, in I think 2014 it was launched. ASI is looking at how we can go in for regional listing of heritage, which are which are shared heritage across countries. We've also initiated this year what is called the Brihatar Bharat program, which is an outreach into Central Asia and Southeast Asia. We also have the Purvotar dialogue, which is looking at how the east of the country can collaborate with the east of the world, which is the Southeast Asian countries. We have Makayas as an organization, which is the Maulana Abdul Kalam Institute for Asian Studies, which actually looks at studies the India and the Southeast Asian and South Asian connect. We also have the legacy of the maritime heritage that we share across the ocean. So we are working on all these different kinds of huge amount of projects that we are doing. We are working with IGNCA, we are working with Matthias, we are working with ASI. Because we also have a whole list of festivals of India, which another division does. I am looking at specifically collaborations between museums and libraries and archives. There's a huge interest from the Central Asian countries, from Australia, from London. Everybody wants to be a part uh, of this country because one, we have huge stuff to offer, and we have huge amount of people to consume the stuff that we have. So if you work with one country, you are working across space, across timelines. We are a 5,000 plus years civilization, with so much to offer in terms of both tangible and intangible heritage. And there's one fallacy that people have. People think that we've been able to preserve a tangible heritage more, and I sometimes feel that we've been able to even preserve our intangible heritage, because the oral archiving, the all the science of why we celebrate the spring equinox as a festival of the harvest, why the Hindu calendar begins in April unlike the Gregorian calendar, is so much linked to nature. So this whole nature culture, there's no divide in our Indian understanding, and the entire science of this has traveled on the back of festivals and festivities, which is the intangible part of our culture. So I think this is so much that we have to offer, but I am more specifically looking at documenting this entire work that we are doing, because documentation along with digitization, preservation, dissemination, translation is what is going to ensure the this eternal timeless civilization continues. Because when we look back 500 years from now, we will be able to know the country how it was. And this is exactly what we've done in the Binale. If you look at Vismay, or if you look at Samatva, you will find those various galleries are actually archiving the contemporary, built heritage of the country. So that is our focus, and the focus is also on creating employment, because we are part of the creative economy. And the AVGC, which is the audio, visual, gaming, and the computer economy, which is all about digitization and using tech and immersive. The substance remains what we have, artifact, manuscript. That is the substance. The technology is a tool that enables the dissemination to happen in the manner that the contemporary generation is best able to understand and imbibe. So I think these are the things that we are doing, because you know uh, everything that we do in this space has a domino effect. About 2.6%, I'm told, it contributes to the GDP. We created about 10 lakhs job in the country just by doing a 115-day Binale. So that is the kind of value and worth that is added. And you can imagine, if you say 10 lakh jobs, you can imagine how much monetary value it would have added in the gig system as well. The carpenters, the electricians, the plumbers, the artists, the fabricators, the exhibitionists, the painters, even the safai walas, everybody who came together to do this. The audience which came by different modes of transportation, everybody has contributed in the Binale. And since I'm getting a little emotional, because just 2 days, last 2 days left, so and doing this interview with you, it is very, very heartening to know in the last year we created three big mega events, which are three cultural products akin very much to you, to say, for example, like a UPI or a Beam in the financial world. What the UPI and Beam is to the financial world, the International Museum Expo, the Festival of Libraries, and the Binale will be in times to come for the in the space of culture and creative economy.
Right, ma'am. The only logic I could come up with for to explain our emphasis on nature, right, is that our civilization always considered ourselves as part of nature. We weren't
Yes,
above the nature, right? We
yes,
were a part of nature.
yes,
That is the reason we worship even the small plants or the weeds, right, which grow in our field. And I think that is also reflected when our prime minister initiates the life initiative, right? The lifestyle for environment. That
yes,
we should have a lifestyle which is sustainable for the environment, so
yes.
that we just don't destroy the everything that we have for us, right?
Mm.
Uh, Ma'am, now we've talked about earlier in the conversation
Mm,
how the ministry is sort of targeting the young population of the nation,
mm,
right? To have a stakeholdership in all these initiatives that the ministry is doing, and it shouldn't come to the ministry. I feel that it should be initiated by the people itself. It
mm,
shouldn't come to the ministry that they should tell the population that you should do this or we are doing this, please
mm,
cooperate or rather please participate, right?
mm,
These things should seep down to the grassroots level.
mm,
So I would like to ask you, someone from the ministry and someone from sort of not the, like you are representing the ministry, right? But if I ask you as a common person,
mm,
like, how can the youth of the nation build a sense of stakeholdership and
mm,
attachment to our roots, like
mm,
to promote our culture? Because as we've already talked, that we need to understand our culture ourselves first. Only
mm,
then we can promote it or rather embrace it. We
mm,
cannot embrace it on its face value.
mm,
We have to see that what all aspects of our culture
mm.
are sort of okay for our contemporary times, right?
Yeah.
So how do you think we should go about it?
Yeah. So I'll first begin with the role of the ministry. The role of the ministry is very simple. The role of the ministry is to be able to provide a platform where you can, see, this is a world of choice that we live in, right? So we offer you a platform where everything that you would want to access is available to you easily and afford there is access and there's affordability, right? So that is a job in a very very simple one line thing. So if you want to read about some knowledge, Indian knowledge system, we have a libraries and you can access them. So what we are doing is we are easing out your access and providing you things where you are, in the manner in which you'd like to consume them. That is the role of the ministry. But if you ask me on a more personal level, which is what you said you like to tell you, everything that we did in the ministry in these three events, in terms of outreach, most of the things were crowdsourced. We use the language of the people, which is we did a lot of crowdsourcing. So we use the social media extensively. We went on Instagram. We reached out. We also did a lot of public private partnerships where young entrepreneurs, the culture entrepreneurs, were doing a lot of things, and we associated them with the job that we were doing. If you look at the Binale today, everything that you have in the Binale is being curated by private people. Of course, the government people have been there, associated. Then, if you look at the artifacts that have come, the installations that have come, the Ojesse Gallery was a total public art gallery, which is all people from different remote parts of the country coming and participating. If you look at the Deshaj Gallery, which is the tribal art gallery, you will see a boy from remote part of Chhattisgarh has sent, sitting there in Chhattisgarh, without even moving from there, has sent three of his paintings, which are displayed there. And there's several of these kind of people who have sent their stuff. So our outreach is not elite. Our outreach is for everybody, because culture is for everybody, and everybody has a culture. That is the other thing. Every unit, every constituent of this country has created a culture. So it belongs to everybody. So everybody is welcome to participate. We are only facilitating their participation. We are only facilitating the dissemination. We are only providing more platforms and more opportunities for them to be able to showcase the kind of work that they are doing, so that there is no, what you say, a gap or distance between us and them. So that distance, we are absolutely, because there is no us and them, right? So everybody needs to be a part. We need to understand the culture. We are in fact learning from the people. Our job is not to create anything. Our job is to offer platforms where it gets co-curated. That is the language, the collaboration, the breaking the silos, allowing people to come together. So we worked with organizations which are not part of a ministry, the Council of Architects. We worked with about 406 schools of planning and architecture, public, private, every which way. The Samunati was all students affair.
Right, ma'am. So, what I could understand with this conversation till now is that the ministry is doing its work.
Mm.
Now, people should take up the mantle and they should come up with ideas for the ministry, how they can sort of like how the people and the ministry can contribute or rather collaborate on different aspects of our cultural sort of identity.
Yeah.
Right? It and the ministry is trying its best to bring our culture, our composite culture, in fact, to the people. Right, as they are children or the teenagers. It shouldn't come to someone who is in their middle ages and they understand that yes, this is our culture. We are seeing all these Instagram reels in the Russia or the sort of the West, people wearing the saris or celebrating festivals like the Indian festivals.
Mhm.
We sort of get a sense of pride that people are embracing our culture, but sometimes I feel that people they themselves do not understand our culture that deeply, like how much they are having this sense of pride. Like they are seeing this Diwali reels, they are seeing these holy videos, and that's it. That's not our culture. Our culture is much more than that. It's just a small part, right?
Yeah. So as we move from the Amrit Kal to the next, vision, which is the Viksit Bharat vision for 2047, when we will be completing 100 years of our independence, I think the ministry has come up with a vision document for Viksit Bharat at 2047, which has all facets across genres, the visual, the performing, the literary arts, what we can do for institutions, and also across all kinds of people who are our stakeholders. And I think that once that Viksit Bharat Vision 2047 document becomes public, then you will be able to understand the kind of nuanced effort that has gone into understanding and presenting and working. Uh, See, our job is to make the field, to level the field for everybody, so that everybody, as per their own choice, is able to partake of the culture that is as much ours as it is theirs, right? And to learn from the different nuances of each other's culture, because ultimately we are all Bharatiya, and this country over the number of years has produced something which is unique to the world. The world takes pride in it, so it's high time that something that empowers us, something that allows us to, when we go abroad, we can say with certain amount of pride that I'm the moment you say I'm an Indian, people look at you, they either look at your dress, they either look at your cuisine, they marvel at the kind of literature that this country has produced, or yoga that we've given to the world, the philosophy that we've given to the world, the whole concept of Vasudeva Kutumbakam, which is what is called globalization. Since 1993, we had it 5,000 plus years old concept. So I think these become very, very important, and we must understand that we need to have our eyes to look at what this country has produced. So I think what the Honorable Prime Minister, when he talks about the Panch Pran, he's telling us, you know, please feel empowered to look at your culture from your own understanding of your culture. Let no other person come and tell you what your culture is all about. I totally agree that culture grows out of interaction. It is two-way impactful. But the idea is that what also Gandhiji said, no, let the winds of change blow from all directions, but I will stand rooted in my own understanding of what it is, while I will learn and grow and branch out, but I will not be undeterred by the winds that are blowing across. So I think that is very, very important.
Right, ma'am. And the punch front that the Prime Minister has initiated, I
Mm,
think as an organization, our sort of objectives also align with that, because
mm,
we are giving out an Indian perspective on world affairs, right? And in that, we don't need other people to tell us what should be our strategic priority. How
mm,
should we react to certain events, right? What is going on in our domestic economy? What is going in our political order? People don't need to tell us that if we are a good democracy or we are not, right? So I think the whole nation has to come together in this. They should take pride in their culture as well as their identity. On
mm,
the other hand, they should also be pragmatic
mm,
to sort of assimilate themselves with the good aspects of the Western culture as well. We shouldn't just keep our culture intact. It's a priority, of course, but we should be pragmatic.
The whole point of balance also came from India, no?
Yes,
Uh,
of course.
the middle path of what
Hmm.
is, see, we have to be accepting, but we have to be able to be accepting of other people. We have to understand where we come from. That is very, very important. As individuals, don't we look back and say, oh, this is where, this is my genealogy. When you look at your genealogy, why can't you look at your lineage? We have such a rich lineage, such a rich heritage. So I think what we do at a more individual level, when we recall the names of our grandparents and then their grandparents as part of whatever rituals that we carry out, at a more larger level, at a more macro level, I think this is what we do when we all come together as a civilization, as a nation, that we look at the legacy that our forefathers have left us. And they say that after the three generations, we have common forefathers. This is what is said in the ritual. If you read the Garud Purana, it says that तीन ही पितरों के नाम लिए जाते हैं, है ना? आपके फादर के, आपके फादर के फादर के, और उनके फादर के फादर के, and then everything becomes a communal forefathers. So that is the very, very unifying concept in our Indian Bharatiya philosophy.
Surely, ma'am, that explains how good we were at permutation and combination. We know what our lineage is. We know our forefathers, right? And we have to just preserve and sustain it over long term, right?
Yes.
Now, with that note, ma'am, I think we should wrap up this conversation. And I must tell you this, that it was truly an enriching one, right? I can simply tell you that almost 90% things were unknown to me before this conversation, and I can bet that is the same for our viewers as well, right? And we are looking forward to more such conversations with you. Thank you for coming, ma'am. Jai Hind.
Thank you so much, Digvijay. It's very nice of you. And to all members of the GeoStrata team, thank you very much for having me for this free flowing conversation. I really enjoyed myself, and for allowing me to talk about the various kind of work that is happening. And to all the viewers who are watching it, thank you so much, because together we can create and co-curate and leave a legacy for our posterity. Thank you. Goodbye.